Chapter 11 Heavens Will Soul Awakening by Hydesgrain. An old and haggard voice resounded, "The next one can go inside." Jason didn't even sense any mana radiating from the presumed old man, only a slight amount of mana could be detected by him. There was an eerie feeling, and it was like a dragon was suppressed inside and his face paled slightly. A single thought appeared in his mind: wolf in sheep's skin. Greg entered the room behind the door first, followed by his parents and his presumed sister. Jason was the last one to enter the room, which's mana density was incredible. Not only that was incredible, rather the size of the room couldn't be described as huge, because that would be too much of an underestimation. Jason couldn't see anything through the bandage, except the radiating mana from the materials, but even then, he was unable to figure out the size. Estimating the height to be more than 30 meters, Jason felt uncomfortable and tiny. A high-graded mana-gathering formation was inscribed inside the room, and Jason detected 10 orbs on top of altars fitting in one's hand, attracting mana greedily. The presumed old man led Greg to one of the altars in the middle. His family and Jason stayed at the bottom of the altar while Greg was told to cut his hand slightly. Afterward, he placed the injured hand on top of the orb to activate the soul awakening. The moment Greg's blood dripped on the orb, Jason felt like he was on ecstasy as huge streams of multicolored mana gathered inside the orb. It didn't stop as the mana continued to steam into the orb for a few minutes until the orb was filled to a certain degree. Thereafter the orb began to shine red in color, and it projected a small white world with a size of 10 meters in diameter. Next to the white world, another world suddenly appeared, and this soul world looked completely different. While the white world had two huge mana streams in two different colors floating around, the other projected world was slightly bigger, had a thick red hue around it without any colorful mana streams floating within. Jason could feel these two worlds, and he instantly understood that this was a double awakening. Two souls inside a single individual was a rare occurrence, and even if the 10 diameters indicated that only a smaller number of soul bond contracts were possible, it was still above average. Next to Jason stood Greg's parents, while father mumbled, "Ha ha ha, my son, as expected." His mother was teary. "Our family has good children." She began to cry, and Jason thought it was a bit too much as he heard her sobbing next to him. The girl sobbed, "Good job, brother, you did it." Jason was way too astonished to understand the situation, and he took out a handkerchief he purchased previously as he went closer to the girl. She looked up to see the youth with bandaged eyes handing her a handkerchief. Accepting the handkerchief, she wondered who this youth was, as he had bandaged eyes while walking freely without his cane. She stopped sobbing and dried her wet cheeks. Jason turned back to the altar where Greg was still standing. He knew roughly how the ranking would look like for Greg's case. The ranking was divided into 0 to 5 stars, while 0 stars was the worst and 5 stars the best. Having 0 stars means one is worse than the common folk and probably only able to form a single soul bond contract with a wild beast, or maybe with some luck an awakened beast. While wild beasts are comparable to ancient animals and only slightly stronger, awakened beasts have the possibility to possess an ability like elemental affinities or body traits. Getting a 1-star result in one's soul awakening means one is almost worthless to high schools, and one is only able to form a contract with probably one beast, while this beast can't be really strong. 2 stars mean one is around the average and on average able to form a contract with at least 2 beasts, more likely 3 beasts and a low awakened beast as the first soul bond. 3 stars were already a rare occurrences among soul awakening, while 3.5 stars are called extraordinary. Most 3 stars are able to form at least 4 soul bonds, maybe even 5, while they're more likely to form a late awakened beast cub as the first soul bond. 4 and 5 star rankings are even rarer, while 4 stars are called Heaven's Will and 5 stars are called God's Child. Both of these soul rankings are exceptional, and very few are able to awaken such souls because everything about them has to be exceptional, including soul size, soul energy, and the type of soul. The old man lost focus for a quarter second before gathering his thoughts. He announced, "Greg Flay, 14 years old, 2nd adept rank, has successfully awoken a double soul. One soul has a diameter of 10 meters while the other one is 12 meters in diameter. Both souls can form 3 soul bonds, while the physical soul might even be able to form a contract with a 4th weak beast. Adding both numbers together, Greg is able to form a contract with 6 to 7 beasts. While the elements wind and thunder are drawn to one soul world, the other soul world is a physical one that allows non-elemental monsters with strength, speed, tenacity, and so on as their forte to form a contract with Greg. This physical soul world would increase the shared amount from the soul bond to the master, with the larger part focusing on the physique. Being able to form a contract with 6 to 7 beats is more than extraordinary, while a double awakening is also rarely seen. But the most important factor is that your soul energy has already reached the red color, close to the light red color, which means you can form a soul bond with a late evolved ranked beast. Adding every aspect together, your potential of 4 stars, which is also called heavens, will, the elder stated relatively calm. Among the few 100,000 kids he had accompanied during his long life, Greg could be placed among the top 1%. More than satisfied with his result, Greg went down to his family, which greeted him cheerfully. Everyone was relieved that Greg got a very good soul awakening, and after getting a hug from his family, Greg turned to Jason, who gave him a thumbs up. Jason thought that it was the right thing to do, and it made him more comfortable. Greg suddenly asked, "Jason, when is your soul awakening? Can I also watch it?" One's soul was normally kept as a secret, as it was one of the most important information about one. Greg would have 4 stars as his exam remark for his soul awakening, nothing more or less, but even that was already seen as a breach of privacy by most people. Jason thought for a second before replying while smiling lightly. "My soul awakening is on the 2 August at 10:25 a.m., you're free to come. You also trusted me with that, so it's only fair." The old man, who previously didn't care about the examinee's company, saw Jason as he looked down from the altar, and the man's eyes widened in astonishment because he could see something through the bandages. Coming back to his senses, he said out loud, "Brat, if you want to have your soul awakening right now, you can come up." "Can I really?" Jason said impatiently, while Greg smiled. However, Greg's parents and his sister felt slightly confused, as they knew how extremely difficult it was for them to have the old man supervising a soul awakening. It was only because Greg was among the best of the best with his exam results and a few months of persuasion until the old man gave in. Now this greedy and stubborn man let an unknown youth perform his soul awakening in front of him nonchalantly, which was weird in their opinion. "Of course that's okay. Come up." Quote. After the old man said that, Jason stepped up the stairs quickly, to the others' surprise. A blindfolded youth rushed up the stairs without tripping or even faltering, straight forward with fast steps. Arriving before the cleaned orb, the old man handed Jason a small knife, which he would have to use to cut his hand slightly. But before Jason could cut himself, the old man stopped him with his hands. He whispered in a quiet voice only both of them could understand, "Brat, why are you hiding your eyes?" Quote. Chapter 12, Devastating Soul Awakening. By Hydesgrain. The old man's voice was monotone and calm, but Jason felt a slight threat within the voice, and he instantly began to sweat. Jason didn't know how this old man found out, but he understood that his secret was exposed. Stuttering something, I was blind until last week, but I awoke my eyes by gathering mana over a long time inside my eyes. I kept this a secret to be able to write my theoretical exam with the VR appliance because I can't write technical language well. There was no way for Jason to resist the pressure of the old man, as he was only 13 years old, so it wasn't that difficult to intimidate him with the small mana fluctuations. Listening to Jason's explanation, the old man understood his situation, even if Jason over-exaggerated the fact. But the old man noticed that Jason didn't have a decent background, otherwise this would not have been a problem. Nodding, the old man said, "Okay. It's fine, I will keep this a secret, but you have to do me a favor in return." Jason felt relieved and also slightly scared, because owning a favor was always bad in his opinion. Continuing, the old man said, "You have to give me your contact information." HMPPF. Jason almost shouted out loud before quickly placing his empty hand above his mouth. "Don't get me wrong, I don't have any ulterior motives, but now it's your turn to have your soul awakening. Keep in mind that you can reveal your eyes soon, but it would be better for you to have a talk with me before that's going to happen, okay? Jason could only nod, still sweating, but he had to focus on his soul awakening right now, so he cleared his mind as fast as possible. Greg's family could only see the old man and Jason talking to each other, and a minute passed until Jason moved again. Jason cut his hand lightly and blood ran down his arm while the injured hand slowly went closer to the orb, which looked dangerous to him. Forgetting his anxiety, he put the hand slowly on the orb, which began to glow lightly as blood dripped on it. Inside him, he felt like something changed as his pores opened, and within his mind, a small and colorful world began to construct around a grain-sized golden marble with mysterious inscriptions on it. First, the world was as small as a peanut, but it began to grow bigger and bigger until his whole mind was filled with the world. Jason suddenly felt an aching in his head as the world inside his mind tried to grow even bigger while hitting the limits of his mind. The pain didn't lessen, rather it increased, and Jason began to cry out in pain as his bandage began to turn bloody red because his eyes began shedding blood. Jason's hand didn't lose grip on the soul awakening orb, but his legs gave in while Jason's cry reached Greg's family, which was more than confused. Even the old man couldn't understand the situation as the orb was still gathering mana from its surroundings. Greg was worried and he wanted to go up, but he was held back by his father with a firm grip. Jason's mind was in chaos as the small world broke through the limits of his mind while continuing to increase without meeting any obstacles. The orb finished gathering mana and its color changed before it began projecting Jason's soul. First, the color of the orb was golden, but the time was too short for anyone to notice it before it changed to green, which was the highest ever recorded color, indicating a vast amount of soul energy. Then it changed to yellow, orange, light red, red, dark red, and finally it ended at pitch black. While the colors changed, Jason's head felt as if it would explode any second, but the changing color from green to yellow and further down the road lessened the pain while the world inside his mind expanded more and more. Jason wasn't even able to figure out the size of the world as he had to focus on not losing his consciousness. After the color of the orb turned pitch black, the world inside his mind stopped expanding, but Jason felt its ambition to grow even more. Jason felt the frustration of his soul world and its incomplete status. The orb, which was pitch black, left the audience speechless as they had never seen such a black color, and finally the orb began to project Jason's soul while Jason began to stabilize himself. Projecting Jason's soul, another spectacle appeared in front of the audience as an unknown number of different kinds of colors filled the room with the bright shining color. The soul itself was apparently bigger than the whole room, and only the old man could see its outer lines as he could see through the whole building. Flabbergasted, the old man noticed that the whole Beast Pagoda area was shrouded in Jason's soul world projection. But the most important fact about Jason's soul was that it radiated a thick and dense golden hue overshadowing Greg's red hue by worlds. Jason, whose head was still hurting, let go of the pitch black orb before his legs gave in again. Because he stuttered, "Is this pain normal?" The old man was thrown out of his thoughts. He had never seen something comparable to Jason's soul, and he wanted to take him as a disciple without any complaints as he saw the color of the orb Jason had used. Wasn't it green before? Why is it black now? No. Why? Exclamation mark. The old man was in disbelief. He thought he had finally found someone even better than God's children, which were 5-star awakenings, but the pitch black color the orb radiated shattered his lifelong dream. Calming down, he looked at Jason with pity, and Greg's family could understand him completely after seeing the pitch black orb in front of Jason. Previously, the old man had the gut feeling that this youth would be even more special than Greg, and he gave out his contacts because of that, but apparently, his gut feeling betrayed him. Before they could only see the huge and vast world projected by Jason's soul, but now they could clearly see the orb. Greg's father wasn't sure if he should pity Jason or be happy, as he didn't want Jason to be more outstanding than his son, but after thinking for a second, he was embarrassed about his thought, and it was definitely a pity that such a beautiful soul had such a weak soul power. The orb's color indicates the strength of one's soul energy and how strong one's soul bond could be at most. While Greg's red, almost light red could form a contract with a stronger evolved beast. Nobody except the old man understood the pitch black, as black with slight red was normally the weakest possible. He wondered if the youth in front of him would even be able to endure the pain from a matured 1-star wild beast, which was by far the weakest possible rank a beast could get. Looking at Jason, the old man announced, "Young man, you have a beautiful soul, and I'm ashamed to say that I don't know how many beasts you can tie to your soul in the future, and I also don't know what the golden hue represents, which gives you 5 stars compared to a god's children at the worst. Unfortunately, your soul energy is the weakest ever recorded in history, and it would be fortunate for you if you can form a bond with a 1-star wild beast. That means you get 0 stars for this section, which is generous in my opinion. Your average would then be 2.5 stars, but I will only give you 2 stars as your soul energy is such a big disadvantage that it is almost impossible to overcome, and even if you can do it, your pals won't wait for you and the gap between each other will get only bigger." After saying this loud out, he added on quietly, "If you find a 1-star wild beast cub, or at least even an egg with decent potential, it might be possible to get stronger in a slow pace, otherwise your future as a possible hunter or comparable jobs is bound to be destroyed." Chapter 13, Unique Eyes. By Hydesgrain. Jason had to face the cruel reality, but it was hard to accept. He felt as if his whole world shattered. He wasn't that ambitious to get a heaven-defying soul bond as his first bond, but a 1-star wild beast. Question mark. Question mark. Question mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Question mark. Even the worst novice ranks were able to defeat them, and such a beast would become his lifelong partner. Adept ranks were able to defeat the strongest 5-star wild beast without much effort, as their physique alone was much stronger than these beasts, and now, Jason would only be able to form a soul bond with a newborn 1-star wild beast at most. He couldn't believe his ears, but somehow he knew that this wasn't a lie and the cruel reality. The old man didn't try to sugarcoat Jason's situation, as he had to overcome this crisis alone. He believed that this situation wasn't the worst outcome at all, as he had seen many youths with a soul that could only hold 1 soul bond in total, with a soul energy only slightly stronger than Jason's. Having the advantage to possess many beasts with the disadvantage of an extremely weak beast as a starter was better than the former unfortunate ones. The old man was firmly convinced that the young man in front of him wasn't ordinary, as Jason's eyes seemed to be special traits in his opinion. Otherwise, the old man couldn't understand why there was so much mana assembled around his eye area. Changing the subject, everyone inside the room listened to him while Jason could only hear him faintly. "Let's go to the beast hatchery where both of you can choose your first soul bond." While the old man said this, Jason stood up and walked down the altar lifelessly. Greg saw this and ran to him asking, "Hey dude, are you okay?" Obviously, Jason wasn't doing fine, but he forced a smile and said, "Yeah, of course." Jason wasn't sure why Greg was worried about him, but he didn't care about that at the moment. The old man walked past the 2 youths who noticed him and followed quietly. Greg had to support Jason slightly while Greg's family followed both of them rather quietly. His mother whispered, "How unfortunate. I've never seen such a beautiful and large soul, honey. Do you think he will be able to overcome the problem with his weak soul energy somehow?" "I can't think of any good solution except forming a contract with a good potential soul bond, or training the Heaven's Hell technique for many years until it shows results. But finding a beast with potential, one among 1-star wild beasts, is more unlikely than finding a needle in a haystack even for us, and we can't even help out during the whole beast selection process. Another one would be increasing his rank, but this would also take a long time even with resources," the man answered after thinking for a short moment. Other than forming a contract with a high potential beast, ranking up and practicing the Heaven's Hell technique over a long time, he would have to find high-graded magical treasures which could increase one's soul energy, but other than being extremely rare, they cost a fortune. "I don't think we would be able to afford one with our whole fortune, even if our son had a soul like this youth has. It's a pity to lose a promising soul like that to such weak soul energy. If he works hard, maybe he can form a second soul bond in a few years, but honestly, I wouldn't be confident in doing something like that." While Greg supported Jason, Jason's mind was in his huge soul world the whole time. Other than being disappointed, Jason had to acknowledge the fact that his soul looked beautiful and magnificent, while the golden color was able to calm him down as he looked around. This however made his heart hurt even more because his soul energy was too weak and he wasn't sure what to do with it, but he didn't want to cry, and rather than crying, Jason wanted to find a solution to his problem. Crying wouldn't help him but solving the problem. Releasing himself out of Greg's support, Jason straightened his back while thinking about solutions, but there weren't many. Purchasing a high-graded magical treasure was out of his options as they were way too expensive, and forming a contract with a high-potential one-star wild beast relied on his luck. Approximately hundreds of stairs later, they entered another room that was even more gigantic than the Soul Awakening Hall. But this place wasn't as quiet as before, and Jason, who could only see slightly through the bandage because of his blood, was astonished to see thousands of colors radiating from eggs and small beasts inside small landscapes filled with faint mana. His head began to ache again, and Jason turned off his eyes effect, which saw the radiating color of beasts. In the second he had activated the effect of his eyes, Jason noticed that some beasts radiated a stronger color than others even if they were from the same race. What does that mean? Was what Jason thought, but he couldn't find a solution. Thinking about the effect, Jason looked around again without having his eyes activated. He stopped for a moment, and after a short moment, he noticed the mana fluctuations of a wolf mother with 5 cubs next to her. That was at least what Jason could see from the mana flow, and activating his eyes effect for a short moment, he began to analyze the cubs thoroughly. The wolf gave birth to all 5 cubs, but Jason noticed that the radiating color was different from the 2 of them. While 3 cubs had the same color, one was more distinct and denser but still the same color, while another cub had a completely different color which was even denser compared to the previously mentioned wolf cub. Many thoughts run through Jason's head as Greg and the old man notice his behavior. The old man explained, "This is a blazing horned wolf mother with its 5 cubs. It's an evolved ranked beast. 2 cubs are slightly special, while one has inherited a slightly superior bloodline. The other cub underwent a mutation which made it stronger." Greg listened carefully as this information could be useful for his choice. "Can you show me which one Sir thinks is the stronger one out of these 2 special cases?" Jason also listened, but his question confused Greg while the old man smiled faintly. The old man knew that Jason had special eyes since the beginning, as he had seen many humans with special traits, and he thought Jason had simple mana eyes which could see that one beast had slightly stronger mana radiating from it. A small stream of mana left his body, and Jason saw a finger formed out of mana pointing at the cub with the superior bloodline. But Jason saw something different. His eyes, or rather the radiating color, told him that the mutated cub had a denser color and a Y left his mouth without thinking. The old man was still calm and explained, "Having a superior bloodline indicates the high possibility to evolve into higher ranked beasts, while having a mutation can backfire. Some mutations are powerful while other mutations are harmful to certain aspects. Furthermore, mutations can evolve when the cub grows stronger, and, in our case, the cub's mutation is still in its initial phase. While it's not seen as a very good mutation, it could further mutate in a bad way." Quote. Jason and Greg exclaimed at the same time. Chapter 14, Creating a Theory by Hydesgrain. Walking around the enclosures and breeding stations with eggs inside, the old man provided mountains of information mainly focused on the characteristics of beast potentials and how to determine their strengths and weaknesses. Normally a beast selection was different without information provided, but the old man was generous because he liked the kids. One had to know that soulbond beasts would not only provide physical enhancements and access to affinity, but also their wild instincts such as bloodlust and more. The characteristics of the physical enhancement depend on the soulbond's strength and also the soul's type, including the shared distribution. If one formed a soul bond with a bull, one would get more strength, while forming a bond with an agile beast would more likely enhance one's tendons, flexibility, and other speed-related body parts before the focus would be on the rest. There were only a few beasts on the first floor of the breeding grounds which inhabited wild beasts, awakened, evolved beasts, and a few unblemished beasts. Magical ranked beasts were in the lower basement and probably extremely few in C-grade cities. Most awakened, evolved, and unblemished ranked cubs weren't much stronger than wild beasts at the beginning, but the growth was faster and it would be much harder to control them without a huge amount of soul energy which was required for higher ranked beasts. Otherwise, the soul bond could backfire and the beast would be able to either control the contractor, destroy one's soul partly, or in the worst case scenario even completely. Greg, who didn't have such problems, could easily control a late evolved ranked beast. As such, he listened extremely carefully. One's soul energy would grow with his first soul bond until it matured, evolved, or when a new soul bond contract was formed with another beast. It was unknown how large the shared amount was, but roughly 3% to 10% of a beast's growth were given to the masters, which depended fully on one soul. While most souls only distributed 3% to 5%, some fortunate ones would get a share of 10% from one's soul bond as their soul was generous. To put it simply, Greg's soul energy was between 400 to 500, and forming a soul bound with a fully grown late evolved ranked beast would use up around 450. But an evolved ranked cub used up less than 450 soul energy at the beginning, and only at the end it would need the previously mentioned 450 soul energy to get subdued. This growth would cause Greg's soul energy to grow and mature in size while the cub matures equally. With a distribution of 10%, Greg would receive around 45 soul energy once his first soul bond matured, under the requirement that the soul energy it needed were 450 units once it's matured. That was another reason why one would form a soul bond with cubs or eggs in the beginning. It's almost one of the most important reasons. Forming a deep connection with cubs is easier than trying to tame wild beasts who lived in freedom. When a beast mutated or evolved into a stronger existence, many things can happen. Either the beast affects the master because the soul energy needed is too high, causing the human to suffer unbearable permanent pain, or the evolved beast shares more of its strength to the human, forcing the soul power to increase, which would also hurt but only temporarily. This happens rarely, and it's still unknown how this can be. To conclude, having a beast that can evolve is a double-edged sword in most cases. And here comes the previously mentioned connection back to the main topic. If one raised up a beast with a high possibility to evolve, a deep connection is important and also much easier to form. Even if a soul bond's soul energy is larger than the master's, as long as it doesn't want to break out of the soul bond contract with force, everything is fine. Once a beast with higher soul energy than the contractor evolves, the whole situation takes a dangerous turn. That's why soul energy is so essential. Even if Jason formed a contract with a one-star wild beast with potential, it was unsure if this beast would stay with him or if it would break the contract and flee. Once his soul was damaged, it would take some time to regenerate the certain spot the previous soul bond occupied, while the innate soul energy remained. But this isn't the only way to increase one's soul energy. Rather than using magical treasures or relying on one's soul bond, one can train the soul energy with certain training methods. These were rather painful, but many desperate people use them because their soul energy is weak. For them, an increase of 1 point in their soul energy would mean that they can bind a slightly stronger beast which might have a stronger potential. But most 0, 1 star, and even some 2-star soul awakening rankings would give up their wish to get stronger and achieve something because obstructions were programmed. Training with these methods increases the soul energy only slightly, except if the innate soul energy is high. In this case, the soul energy increases faster cause the increasing rate is based on percentage. Jason meanwhile had at most 1 point in soul energy, more likely even less, which means he would suffer pain even if he formed a contract with a matured 1-star wild beast, so he had to start training with the special method soon to prevent permanent injuries. He already knew it, but he still couldn't believe his bad luck. After looking around for a few hours, it was already late at night, but Greg was still pondering which beast to pick as his first soul bond. 3 evolved ranked cubs were among them, and all of them had roughly the same dark green radiating color, while one looked marginal denser for Jason. These beasts were a wind-attributed condor, a thunder-attributed wolf, and a newborn lesser orc. Jason didn't mind which one he should pick out of them because they were roughly the same until he saw a non-elemental bull calf with a feeble but dense green color enveloping it. After looking at these 1,000 types of beasts, Jason formed the theory that the colors he could see were the beast's potential. A list had already formed in his mind over the last few hours, beginning with color black, light gray, dark green, and finally green. There was only a single green radiating color from a beast, but the radiated color was incomparable to dark green. The beasts Greg was pondered to choose had all the potential color dark green, which was comparable to an unblemished beast. While black was comparable to awakened beasts, light gray seemed to be the potential of evolved beasts. The green color Jason saw right now was different from the green he had seen on the other beast, as it seemed to be weaker, but when Jason saw it, it was quite marvelous to see as the radiating color moved around the bull calf vigorously. This green color seemed to be weak and feeble, but at the same time it seemed strong, and Jason wondered why this was the case. It looked almost excited, and Jason was tempted to pull down his bandage, but he behaved himself. He had still his blooded bandage on, but the outlines of this calf were detailed as if he saw it with his normal eyes. Chapter 15 Intimidation by Hydesgrain. Jason's steps stopped and he risked exposing himself without any logical reason. But somehow he felt it was the right decision, even if he wasn't sure why. "Greg, why don't you form a soul contract with this bull calf?" Without any explanation, Jason asked the question, not thinking about anything special. This sentence caused the old man to stop in his tracks as looked at the calf carefully. This is only a normal mid-evolved ranked beast cub called Reinforced Horned Bull. Its chances to evolve into a higher unblemished being is lower compared to the other 3 potential bonds of Greg. Contracting this beast would be a waste. Greg's parents and his sister heard this, and they nodded their heads, agreeing to the old man's explanation, while Greg's sister threw a threatening glance at Jason. Meanwhile, Greg looked at the reinforced horned bull calf, not knowing why Jason wanted him to pick this beast cub. While Greg went closer to the bull calf, Jason, who stood next to him, said out loud, "I think this bull calf is much better compared to the other 3 choices." There was no explanation or anything like that coming from Jason. In a quieter voice, he added to Greg, "You can pick whichever beast you want to pick because it's your decision, but don't regret your decision later." Somehow what Jason said made Greg ponder. He wanted to pick the newborn lesser orc, which would be bound to his physical soul. However, picking the non-elemental bull calf would make a difference of a whole rank, as the lesser orc had the possibility to reach the unblemished rank with a certain amount of resources provided. Greg turned to Jason and questioned him, "Why do you think this beast is better than the orc, for example?" It was weird for Jason to say something like that, without giving a reason, and Greg believed that Jason wouldn't want to harm him, even if Greg didn't know why he trusted Jason so much. Jason was in a tight spot because he still thought that he had to keep his eyes a secret, as he remembered the old man's words that his eyes could be revealed. Turning to the old man, he asked him again to be certain. "Old man, what you said earlier is still valid, right?" The old man was confused, but he nodded his head. "Yeah, well, it is." Turning back to Greg, Jason slowly loosened the bandage, which was still full of blood and already dried up, causing an unpleasant feeling while taking the bandage off. His eyes were closed because of the sudden light invading them. After a short moment of adapting to the sudden stream of light, as Jason opened his bright golden shining eyes, looking straight into Greg's eyes. "What's with your eyes? You're not blind anymore?" Question mark. Greg was astonished and his jaw dropped to the ground. He knew Jason many years long, and his eyes looked like a dead fish every time he looked at him, making him feel uncomfortable, but now they were full of vigor and golden in color at that. It was the first time for Jason to see Greg, and he had a muscular build with short brown hair and eyes with a frown destroying his facial features. Jason had to ponder how to put it as he said, "I had to gather mana for a long time to reactivate them. There was some sort of problem previously I had to fix, causing me to forsake absorbing mana into my mana core. And my eyes are slightly special to add." Thinking for a second, Jason told, "Back to the main topic. I recommended this bull calf because my eyes tell me that it's the right choice for you to do. In the end, it's your decision to do what you think is right, and don't let anyone hinder you." Greg's family only saw Jason taking off his bandage, Greg's astonishment, and his loud voice. They didn't know what was going on, but they weren't fond of this situation as they understood that Jason wanted Greg to pick the bull calf, which the old man said was weaker than the other 3 beast cubs. Greg smiled at Jason, who returned the smile and confidently said out loud, "I want the reinforced horned bull calf as my soul bond." Hearing this, Greg's parents were dumbfounded while his sister shouted with anger, "Brother, don't be stupid, what knowledge has this blind boy without any background we don't have? Don't be naive!" Exclamation mark. She went closer to the 2 youths that still looked at each other, while Jason's back was only 5 meters apart from her. Somehow, she wanted to hit Jason really hard in his face as she grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back. The face of a gorgeous teenage girl with beautiful facial features, fair skin, big brown eyes, and long eyelashes entered his view, distracting him slightly. Meanwhile, the girl's face changed completely from anger to astonishment before it changed to shock as she looked into the youth's golden eyes with surprise shining within them. The golden eyes felt as if they were as deep as the abyss but full of vigor. Jason was a little bit angered as he didn't like to get thrown around or touched by strangers. Staring into Jason's eyes, the girl felt uncomfortable because it was as if she couldn't hide anything from him. Looking into these eyes only a moment longer would be fatal, and she would probably expose every secret she had without any hesitation, and she backed off and loosened her grip, almost tripping. Greg, who held Jason, was a little bit confused. He understood his sister's rage slightly, however, he had never seen her backing off from clashes. But right now, looking into Jason's eyes caused her to back off, which was interesting. The old man was annoyed by Greg's sister's behavior and said, "If you finish choosing your soul bond, you can leave while I will help out Jason choosing his bond. Your parents can help you with the last steps as they aren't difficult." Greg was disappointed that he wasn't allowed to look for Jason's soul bond, but he had to accept the old man's order. While Greg said goodbye to Jason, his sister looked suspiciously at him, and Greg's father looked somehow angry at Jason. The reinforced horned bull calf was brought to a different room by an attendant, and Greg followed the staff with his family. Now, Jason and the old man were alone. While the old man looked at Jason curious, Jason was slightly apprehensive. "Why are you so sure that the reinforced horned bull is better than the other cubs we have looked after? Is it really because of your eyes?" The old man was suspicious about him and also curious, while Jason got slightly nervous. If he really told him the theory about his eyes seeing the potential of beasts, Jason wasn't sure what would happen, so he made up a story. "I'm not sure what's so special about my eyes, but after seeing the bull calf I got the feeling that it is stronger than the other beasts Greg wanted to choose from. But to be honest, I could also be wrong, and I told Greg that it's his decision which beast to pick, but I hope I'm not wrong." This caused Jason to stumble backward. While he was forced to turn around, Jason was completely attacked off guard, still looking towards Greg, as his shoulder was unexpectedly pulled back. Chapter 16, Searching for the Perfect Partner by Hydesgrain. Listening to Jason, the old man nodded after a moment before he said, "Well, it's okay. It doesn't really matter to me if his soul bond is really stronger than the other cubs. But if it's true that your eyes are special, I think it might be better to keep it a secret, that you feel which beast has a stronger potential or feels stronger. Don't tell the other youth anything except your trust in him is exceptionally high, because they don't know that your eyes are special to such a degree. The only thing they know right now is that your eyes are golden. They don't know anything about the degree of your special trait, which might be better." Jason noticed the last sentence and got curious about the traits. "What is a trait? My late mother also told me something about traits, but I forgot it. Some humans are born with special traits. These traits are divided into physical traits, elemental traits, blessings, and so on. Traits are sometimes called mutations, and they enhance certain body parts or even provide the chance to use elements' abilities without having a suitable soul bond. Your eyes are considered a rare physical trait, but I have never seen such intimidating golden eyes, so I don't know what trait it is, but probably something comparable to mana eyes. Jason listened to the old man carefully and he began to partially understand his mother's reasoning. Previously his mother had only told him that regaining his eyesight would only take a few years because that was probably what she had to do due to her own special trait. This means his mother also possessed a special trait for her eyes, which made Jason curious. But Jason took almost 10 years to regain his eyesight while his mother was getting more and more frustrated when he was younger. Before she died, his mother cried often, because of Jason's inability to see. She got more and more desperate as he was her treasure, everything she had left. Thinking about his mother made Jason sad once again, but he was almost immediately distracted by the old man. Let's go take a look after the one-star wild beast's cub or egg. It's already late and we don't have many types of one-star wild beasts, to begin with. The old man turned in a certain direction and went off, followed by Jason. After walking for 15 minutes, they arrived at a small section with small canine and feline cubs and thousands of eggs. Most one-star wild beasts are only contracted for their look, while some one-star wild beasts are trained to run errands. The most popular beasts are similar to ancient dogs, cats, eagles, and so on. You can take a look. In this generation, we don't have any beasts with a superior bloodline or favorable mutations. I'm sorry. If you want to wait for a few months, then there might be something new, but getting a better bloodline or favorable mutations depends on luck. Jason tried to listen to the old man while looking with his eyes ability after the beast cubs and egg, but there wasn't even a color radiating from more than 99% of these beasts. But some beasts had a weak black color, which meant they had the chance to evolve into an awakened beast. Due to his unique soul, Jason could form a contract with every kind of beast and there weren't any requirements he had to fulfill, which was his only advantage, as the number of beasts he could form a contract with was also high but not measurable. Jason was tempted to pick one of these black color radiating beasts solely to increase his soul energy, but he had to remain calm and think carefully about his decision. Was it useful to form a contract with hundreds of beasts only to increase his soul energy slightly? Wouldn't it be a waste of his mana eyes ability? Backquote: in addition to that, the costs to feed the beasts would also be astronomical. Jason looked at every beast cub and egg carefully with his eyes ability, and more than 20 minutes passed before he was almost done with his inspection. Suddenly, he saw a weak but heavy and mighty, yet unfamiliar color beneath some larger eggs. Looking at the unfamiliar color caused his eyes to ache, as his eyes felt as if they were stabbed by burning needles. Carefully moving the eggs on top away, he saw an egg that was at most half the size compared to the others on top of it. He was confused seeing this color, and his perplexed expression attracted the old man's attention, as Jason asked, "What's wrong with this small egg? Was it placed in the wrong breeding station, or is this really the same species?" Looking at the egg, the old man typed something on his bracelet, before a holographic screen appeared in front of him. After reading it through for a few seconds, he said, "This egg is the same species as the others inside this breeding station, but it underwent an adverse mutation that caused its size to shrink. Furthermore, the scan that was done said that its strength will be worse than a normal one-star wild beast because of an high possibility of the beast getting blindness and other illnesses once it hatches." Jason, however, smiled like he had found a peak-graded magical treasure. The radiating color was weak but extremely heavy and dense, and it was as if the beast inside the egg wanted to life against all odds. Looking at the old man with his bright golden eyes, Jason said with confidence, "I want this snowflake owl as my soulbond, please!" Slightly surprised about Jason's confidence, he looked at the provided information again. With a slight frown, he asked, "Are you sure?" You know that once your soulbond contract is done, it's over, right? If this adverse mutated snowflake owl doesn't evolve, you won't be able to pick another soulbond for a long time until you increased your soul energy. And there is also an extremely high chance that it will get blindness and other diseases once it hatches. You have to decide now, otherwise I will register your soulbond to be this beast egg. The old man tried to help Jason out, but somehow, he felt that his desire to get the snowflake owl increased. Jason stared at the old man and nodded his head while holding the small egg carefully. "Yes, please give me this snowflake owl." Quote. Sighing, the old man said, "Okay, but you don't have to pay the fee for this egg as it has an adverse mutation, and nobody would want it either." It was already past 10 p.m. and the lights lightened up the room when Jason and the old man were standing at a table with the small beast egg placed on a cushion. Jason had a small knife in his hand and he had to cut his hand again to form a soul bond contract again. Entering the world inside his mind as the old man explained to him, Jason loosened a thread out of the soul world, leading it slowly and carefully to his left hand. After the soul thread entered his hand, Jason cut the exact position with the knife and thick blood dropped down. But different than normal blood, Jason noticed that the color of his blood was not only red, but it also had the golden hue which his soul had. Dripping on the egg, the blood began to boil and evaporate, causing the snowflake owl egg to shine with weak white light. Jason felt a connection building up between him and the beast inside the egg, which slowly intensifies. The whole process of a soul bond contract was relatively boring to look at, but Jason was exhausted as it was difficult to loosen a thread out of one's soul. Jason's legs almost gave in, but he had to remain standing. Looking at Jason, the old man was still unsure what to think about this boy. His eyes were a special trait, and he had a very unique soul even if his soul energy was extremely weak. If his soul energy was only slightly better, every high school would offer him a scholarship without thinking about his grades. Even 5-star institutes from S-grade cities on Cania wouldn't wait to offer him many benefits. Unfortunately, his soul energy is just too bad. He wanted to finish everything up and said impatiently, "You have my contacts, right? If something goes wrong, just call me. Maybe I can help you. Just take the egg with you and keep it close to you. It will hatch in the next few days. As for the possible disease it can get, you should consult a professional about ways to prevent that. We didn't bother to do something like that. I have to go now, there are other things I have to do and you two have taken up too much time. Let's go out." Walking out with the egg in his hands, Jason smiled gently at it, not minding the old man. Jason ordered a shuttle and said politely goodbye to the old man. Going to the Beast Pagoda changed Jason's life completely, and there were many obstacles he had to overcome. Chapter 17 No Time by Hydesgrain. It was past 11 p.m. when Jason arrived in his small room completely exhausted. Holding the small beast egg in his hands, he could feel the thumping of its heart. Because he was exhausted, the only thing he was able to think of was sleeping, without considering his unhatched soul bond. His day was extremely long and Jason had completely used up the mana he had gathered in the morning. His head ached and he took off his clothes, only wearing underwear as he went into the bed in order to sleep with the beast egg close to his heart. Waking up early in the morning, the first thing Jason did was looking at the beast egg that was still placed in his hand. Activating his eyes ability, he confirmed that yesterday wasn't a dream as the beast egg radiated still the same dense but weak color as before. Washing up, he put on a set of newly purchased clothes, before Jason decided to replenish his mana. There were many ways to replenish one's mana. The slowest would be resting, not doing anything, as the body attracted marginal amounts of mana by itself. With this method, it would take Jason a few days to replenish his useless small storage of mana. The second method was much more efficient and sitting relaxed down while feeling the mana flow slowly adjusting to it so that it would go through one. While this happened, one could actively absorb the mana. This method was the one Jason used, and it took only 2 hours to replenish his mana completely thanks to his distinct mana sensitivity and control. However, the fastest method to replenish one's mana was using mana stones, but it was also the most expensive method, as mana stones were relatively rare and expensive. Since the Dark Age and the sudden outburst of mana, some rare stones, trees, ores, and many more things absorbed mana, causing them to change innately. Some normal stones absorbed mana, causing them to change into mana stones, with the density, quality, and quantity grading them. While this happened occasionally, sometimes the permanent and temporary rifts were known for their innately manifold materials. This was also the reason rifts were seen as a blessing in disguise. Jason didn't have enough money to use mana stones, so wasteful, and the method he used was more than good enough for him. There were also some other methods one could use to replenish mana faster, like certain techniques, but these were rare and only people from the higher society could obtain and learn them. Jason, as one of the lowest in the chain of society, could only dream about learning such a technique at the moment. Looking at his soul bond, he remembered that the old man said something about the snowflake owl having some problems with its mutation. Looking at the feeble radiating color of the beast egg, he didn't really listen to the old man's advice, so he began to worry about his soul bond's health for a moment. He immediately entered the Federation network in order to look out for professional doctors with a specialty for beast illnesses. While the holographic screen from his bracelet opened, he noticed that he got a message from an unknown number. Opening the message, he saw that it was the old man's number, with the content of the message being a file about his soul bond. He was happy that he received the file about his soul bond, as Jason was pondering if he should write a message to the old man because he needed to know what the exact problem was with his beast. Looking through the file, Jason noticed that he couldn't understand anything at all. There were some scales and numbers, measuring something, but it looked like an alien language to him. Feeling useless, Jason went online in order to continue his search for a professional. Even if it was Sunday, Jason had to know what's wrong with his soul bond beast before it hatched. And the main issue was that it wouldn't take long for eggs to hatch once they're bound. Jason was told that it would at most take 2 days from now, which wasn't far away. There were so many things he had to purchase, like beast cub milk, food, training material for himself and his beast, and many more things, as he was completely unaware of what newly hatched owls would eat. Furthermore, his flat was way too small for a beast, even if it was only a small owl. The things he wanted to purchase required some space, and he would have to lease a new apartment soon. Placing these thoughts in his mind, he had to make a list, what to do first. The most important thing right now was to figure out how to prevent his soul bond beast to get any disease or other problems. Looking up a few sites, Jason found a reliable website with a professional that had a few certificates and theory papers about beastology, while most were about beast cubs, including theories about birth disease and adverse mutations. Jason thanked his luck as he dialed the number shown on the website without hesitating for a second, as a young female receptionist answered his call. Talking with her for a few minutes, Jason was feeling more and more frustrated as the receptionist wanted to make an appointment for a month later. How could he wait a month when the snowflake owl would hatch in 2 days? Exclamation mark. He wanted to shout out loud, but that wouldn't help out in his current situation, so Jason calmed down. Pressuring the receptionist a little bit, Jason sent Even the file about his beast through the holographic screen, without waiting for an answer from her. Jason was about to beg the receptionist to give him 5 minutes as he heard a middle-aged voice in the background of the receptionist asking her, "What's wrong?" The receptionist was still somehow calm, as she was probably used to people like Jason when she answered the middle-aged man honestly what was going on. Jason couldn't hear anything for a few minutes until he heard a quiet, "Interesting." Then the middle-aged voice could be heard closer. "Young man, if you have time, you can come over in the afternoon at 5 p.m. I will spare some of my time. You can follow the described way at our website in order to find my office. Don't be late. I don't like waiting." He ended the call, and one could only see the astonished Jason looking at an empty holographic screen. Then a smile emerged on his face as he was one step closer to his goal. Jason hoped that this doctor could help him out, and he was about to jump around with the soul bond egg in his hand, as he noticed that it might be a bad idea. It was 1 p.m. when Jason finished replenishing his mana, and after eating some small snacks he went out. Calling a shuttle, Jason wanted to visit a few apartments so he could escape from the filthy room that began to disgust him. The prices ranged from a few hundred credits to thousands of credits for the outskirts of a C-grade city. Once one wanted to purchase an apartment closer to the center, the price would skyrocket as the center was the safest area with the most and best security. Jason's district was one of the filthiest and most dangerous with the highest crime rate of the whole city, and he didn't want to live there longer than he had to. To move into a bigger apartment within a safer district, he would have to pay at least a few thousand credits per month. With around 300,000 credits left, Jason was pondering what to do, as never knew when he would gain credits once again, or how much he had to purchase in the future. For most humans with soul bond beasts, their beasts could be considered the most expensive, as some needed expensive meat or other nutrition to nurture and train them. Furthermore, taking combat training, magic classes, learning battle skills and other techniques with knowledgeable instructors was expensive. However, these expenditures could be avoided by attending a high school, which was Jason's goal. Resources that might increase the chances of an evolution and many more things one needed were also expensive and difficult to obtain without connections. Driving around with a shuttle and looking for new apartment, 4 hours passed in no time, and Jason stood now in front of the address written down on the Beast Professionals website. Going inside, he was greeted by the female receptionist he previously talked to. She showed him the way to the office and left afterward. Walking inside with slight hesitation, Jason was greeted by a middle-aged man with blonde hair and eyes with a gentle smile. The man was tall but skinny, and he radiated the aura of a NEET, which Jason didn't mind. Rather than that, he felt more comfortable around people like that. Chapter 18, Solving Issue by Hydesgrain. Seeing Jason, the man stood up, introducing himself first. "Hello, my name is James Gray. You must be the young man who made his first soul bond yesterday." "Hello, my name is Jason Stella, and it was me who called desperately this morning. I hope you can help me and my soul bond out," Jason said with little hope. "I already read through the file you sent me today, and there are different problems the beast has to face. But I can't be sure without scanning the beast myself, as my equipment is more advanced. If you don't mind, we shall make a test right away." James stood up and Jason followed without hesitation, holding the snowflake owl egg in his jacket's pocket. 3 rooms further, they entered a room with a huge amount of equipment. Jason didn't know what they were used for. One particular machine stood out, as it was the biggest and black in color. It stood in the center, and on an elevation was a cushion which was a dent in the middle, looking like many eggs were already placed on it before. "Place the egg inside the cushion right in front of you, please. The test itself won't take long." Jason did as instructed. After placing the egg, he stepped back to see that a transparent bell-formed instrument slowly descended, covering the whole egg. A small red light came out of the top of it while A**peep* resounded in the room, and it scanned the whole area inside the transparent bell a few times. Less than a minute passed, and the test was already finished. The transparent bell was lifted, and Jason took his beast egg again before looking at James intently. Meanwhile, James was looking at the report on his quantum bracelet with shining eyes. "Oh, so it's like that. Interesting." After reading the report for 5 minutes, James noticed Jason's desperate look next to him, before he smiled lightly. Looking down at Jason's small build, seeing his desperate expression, James felt weird. Why is this boy so desperate and going around here alone? What's with his eyes? Shaking his head to focus again, James led Jason to the office where they sat down on a couch. Jason was impatient right now, so he asked straightforwardly, "What's wrong with my soul bond and how can I help it?" James sighed before he said, "Right now our knowledge about beasts, mutations, and evolutions is shallow, and we can only make theories about most things. Reading both test files told me that your beast has a mutation. It's unsure if it really is an adverse mutation, to be honest. It is definitely true that without any countermeasures it will be hard to prevent birth disease and other issues. However, that does not necessarily have to be the case. I can't give you a perfect solution for your beast's problem, but both files gave me some clues about the main issue. But to tell you beforehand, this is only my theory and not something thoroughly tested or acknowledged by the Federation at the moment." Listening to the professional's reply, Jason's heart felt heavier, but a small ray of hope was still burning in him as he heard the theory. Even if your soul bond is a 1-star wild beast, it needs a certain amount of nutrition and mana to survive. I think you got the beast egg from the beast pagoda, which means tens of thousands of beasts have to share the same amount of mana in a small space. Due to your beast's mutation, the problem might be that it needs more mana to develop its body and mana core. One solution could be a large mana supply, as it has a deficit. It needs more mana to grow and is so small in size because of the scarcity of mana. To solve this problem in a short time, you would have to purchase mana stones. I don't know if you have enough credits to do that, but right now I can't think of any other countermeasure before the beast hatches, and it's still unsure if this solution is 100% helpful. I'm sorry. Jason listened to James carefully and he wasn't sure if he should be happy or sad. It was only a theory and not a 100% solution, but it was still better than nothing. After asking a few additional questions, Jason left an hour later. He didn't even have to pay something, as Professor Gray wanted to use the test files for his studies. He got Professor James Gray's contact details, as the professor was fascinated about the files he read previously. Hoping that Jason's beast would hatch healthy, searching for mana stones online, he found out that even the smallest mana stone was extremely expensive. 50,000 credits for a ping-pong ball-sized grade 1 mana stone sounded horrifyingly expensive for Jason, but after searching for more information he found out that the compressed mana inside such a small stone was already around the same amount as an unblemished beast. This surprised Jason, but thinking about it, it wasn't as illogical as he previously thought. An unblemished beast was comparable with a human expert rank, and to replenish his mana once, a human expert would have to use up a whole ping-pong ball-sized grade 1 mana stone. It was extremely expensive even for normal expert ranks, as hunting unblemished beasts resulted often in injuries that had to be treated with expensive medications. Jason wanted to purchase 3 small mana stones, but he had to set an address where to deliver the goods, so before buying the mana stones Jason contacted the landlord from one of the apartments he visited today in order to sign a lease. The cost was 2,500 credits per month, and the area around it was safe while everything needed was close by. Signing the contract on his quantum bracelet, he could instantly move in. There wasn't anything at his old flat, as he brought all the important things with him in his storage space. The new apartment was 55 square meters big, with a bedroom, bathroom, living room, and a small kitchen inside. It looked small and comfy when Jason visited the apartment, but he didn't want to lease it instantly as he wasn't sure how expensive his beast's treatment would be. With a little bit less than 150,000 credits left after deducting 3 small mana stones, Jason had more than enough left to lease the small apartment for half a year. Calling a shuttle to carry him to his new home, Jason arrived at 7 p.m. when it was already late. Finally purchasing the 3 small mana stones, Jason set the destination from the parcel to his new address. Afterward, he wanted to stroll around in order to get to know his new neighborhood, which he hasn't done before. Jason was like a small child, interested in everything, as it wasn't that long since he regained his eyesight, and everything looked special to him. Smelling nice food from the nearby food stall, Jason ordered a big pizza which he relished. He hadn't eaten anything good and savory for years, and it was the first time for him to eat pizza, and Jason enjoyed eating it. The beast egg was inside a small bum bag close to Jason. After he finished the pizza, Jason's belly was filled to the brim. He had never eaten so much before, but he was happy and satisfied with his current life. It wasn't that every problem he had was solved, but rather in the beginning, his biggest issue was his sight. Afterward, his almost non-existent soul energy seemed to be a huge problem, and now his soul bond beast was having some issues. Jason hoped that the mana supply from the mana stones would be enough to solve his problems, which would solve each problem he had right now. He wasn't scared that his new companion was useless, as he had seen the dense color Jason had never seen before, but the problem was that the color was feeble, which caused him to hesitate when he saw it. But getting to know that he could probably solve his issue made him excited. After strolling for an hour, Jason went home to his new apartment, where he would continue learning how to write difficult words. Furthermore, he enjoyed reading the Beastarium, which was full of the beasts' pictures, with their characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, rank, and many more information. It was almost midnight when Jason fell asleep with the Beastarium holographic screen still open. Chapter 19 Preparations by Hydesgrain. It was 8 a.m. when Jason woke up by a small movement in his hand. The hand holding his beast egg shook slightly and Jason's facial expression changed drastically. He was instantly fully awake and frowned deeply. "Buddy, can you wait please a day? You'll have some problems when you hatch now. Please." "Okay," Jason said and thought of it at the same time as sincerely as possible. Due to the connection between their souls, the egg somehow understood what Jason said and stopped its movement. Jason felt the small owl's impatience and desire to break out of its prison, but it waited because it knew that once it hatched without getting help beforehand, many problems could occur. Snowflake owls were in fact not smart, but the mutation Jason's snowflake owl underwent was apparent everywhere. This was something Jason knew, and he hoped that his soul bond would listen to him, which it luckily did. Sighing in relief, Jason looked on his bracelet if his parcel arrived. Seeing a notification saying that the parcel was ready to be delivered, Jason immediately requested it. Only a few minutes later, Jason received another notification telling him that his parcel arrived. Opening the apartment door, Jason saw a drone with a small package bound on it. The drone scanned Jason's ID, loosened the package and flew away. There was not much time left for his soul bond to hatch, and Jason opened the parcel without any delay before noticing the huge amount of mana inside the package. Jason was previously too focused on his beast, but now by looking more concentrated, he saw a huge amount of mana inside the mana stones. Compared to the natural mana around the city, these 3 small mana stones were like a huge ocean concentrated in a small area. It was said that the mana inside cities was extremely thin and weak, whereby the wild zones were categorized by 2 factors. One factor was the amount and density of natural mana around the wild zone, and another factor was the rank of the majority from the beasts inside the wild zone. The amount of mana Jason felt from the small 3 mana stones was roughly as much as the radiating mana from certain materials the Beast Pagoda used, astonishing him. Picking up the 3 mana stones, Jason immediately felt a tickling sensation. He was tempted to absorb the mana to strengthen himself, but he resisted the urge, because there was someone who needed it more desperately. Jason laid the small egg down on a pillow and formed a triangle with the small mana stones around it. Each mana stone was in touch with the eggshell, and Jason saw through his mana eyes that small threads of mana flowed into the egg. The whole egg was mantled with mana and it flowed inside the egg from all sides, absorbing it slowly. Considering the slow mana flow and the upcoming hatching, Jason calculated that 3 mana stones were enough for the time being. The egg stopped moving and Jason had now some time left to search for more information about snowflake owls and other things he didn't know. He was unsure if his soul bond's mutation would change its eating habits or something like that, so he had to prepare all different kinds of food. Purchasing some vegetables, meat, and milk with different kinds of cub formulas, Jason felt prepared. After he finished his purchase, Jason decided to look up some other information while laying on his bed. His knowledge was vast compared to his peers, but considering the fact that he couldn't see previously, Jason lacked many things. He knew many beasts by the names, characteristics, and habits, but he couldn't classify them if he only saw a picture. Furthermore, his combat prowess was awful as he remembered the Azure Feisty Ape martial art, but only a single sequence at that. It was like Jason opened the book of a single page which he repeated one after another. The page's content would provide him with any information which he could apply straightforwardly. However, the issue would be, not understanding what the content means would be like studying without being able to apply the learned formula with marginal changes. Jason understood the Azure Feisty Ape's first sequence, including the mana flow inside his body, but he had never fought with anyone before. His body was also on the weaker side as he was still malnourished and only a second novice rank. There were many things to overcome for Jason, but he had to take one step at a time, and the first thing he did was opening the holographic screen of his quantum watch to continue reading the Beastarium. Rather than randomly looking at beasts and their characteristics, Jason chose the section about a 1-star wild zone next to the Artes city. Wild zones range from 1 star to 4 stars, while each rank represented one beast rank. 1-star wild zones are mostly infested by wild-ranked beasts, and 2-star wild zones have mostly awakened beasts. Above the wild zones were magic beast zones, which don't really matter to Jason right now as it was far away from him. 1-star wild zones are also called training zones for most Hyshulers, as almost no human would be endangered while fighting against wild beasts. The youths of Jason's age had on average the strength to defeat 1-star awakened beasts because their rank was around the 8th novice, with a 1-star awakened beast cub as soul bond on average, which gave them some nice strength, increasing their combat prowess. With a slightly decent comprehension ability and decently learned combat techniques through good instructions, wild beasts would be an easy pie for them. But to learn about the characteristics of beasts and their bloodlust combined with their instincts, one had to face their fear of dying. Killing a living organism was completely different than ordering meat or something comparable, and fighting a life and death battle couldn't be handled by every youth. Some people had no problem killing wild beasts, while others fainted or peed their pants even if they had a big advantage in combat prowess. Jason, however, had a huge disadvantage against most wild beasts, like his low rank, the non-existing amplification of his soul bond now, and his lacking combat abilities. He wasn't sure how high his amplification he would get from his soul bond in the future, but even if his beautiful soul had an extraordinarily high amplification, it wouldn't be useful as the snowflake owl was a 1-star wild beast. Thinking about his shortcomings, Jason frowned while he continued reading the Beastarium. Chapter 20, Hatching. By Hydesgrain. Jason tried to distract himself while reading some news about Asterix Island, as he wanted to research if he had a chance to enter a high school with his score. Thinking about his non-existent combat experience or knowledge, he opened the Federation network. Jason searched for martial arts instructors and their prices, only to find out that it was extremely expensive. Entering a high school would be cheaper than having a few lessons by these instructors, but Jason's final exam wasn't good enough to enter a decent one. He could apply for his blindness remark to get removed, but that wouldn't solve his problem. Looking at his exam results at his profile, Jason was slightly embarrassed. Theoretical exam 100 and 100th points. Practical exam 34 100th points. Blood test. Passed. Remark. Blind. Mana core rank. Second novice minus 40 100ths. Soul awakening. His soul awakening rating was also a bad joke. The old man was probably generous because nobody with his soul energy would get 2 stars as a rating. Or maybe the old man was too astonished about his soul world, which blurred his mind. He had around 130.000 credits left, and he had to survive with this money for a certain amount of time until he could earn money himself. Hunters are well paid, and even hunting wild beasts gave some credits as they infested the areas around cities and endangered them even with their low rank. Their population was way too large, which is also the reason why 1-star wild zones are used for middle schools to train their students. The only good thing about these beasts was that their hide, tendons, claws, meat, and so on could be used by poor people. Average households would never buy clothes made of wild-ranked beasts, as the beast hide wasn't comfortable to wear and didn't look good enough, to begin with. There were only a few rare beasts with comfortable fur, wealthier households would purchase, which would in return increase the price for such beasts. Protection garments out of wild-ranked beasts were also useless, as normal grade 1 weapons could slash through them like butter. Nevertheless, a wild beast carcass could get up to 25 credits if one was extremely lucky, which was already a decent bounty for such weak beasts if one assumes that normal workers earned 1500 credits per month on average, considering that they didn't do anything special. Through Jason's mind rattled many thoughts, while he researched martial arts instructors. In the end, he found an interesting website with many martial arts video clips online from Martial Heaven. Martial Heaven is an online platform that was even approved by the Federation. The website provided online instructions about all kinds of martial art techniques, including martial arts about every kind of element. After registering an account with his ID and inputting his rank and other information, a selection window popped up, where Jason could select the weapon he wanted to use. If he wanted to, Jason could even include what type of elemental affinity the martial techniques should focus on. Furthermore, Jason could also select his requirements and much more information. Registering at Martial Heaven cost 100 credits a month, which was a fair price because Jason saw a few hundred free videos included in his membership. Looking through the videos, Jason found out that most of them were like tutorials leading to a playlist of pay-to-watch videos. After that, Jason wanted to throw a fit, but he was reminded again that most martial arts were uploaded by normal common people trying to make some pocket money while sharing their tips and tricks. Searching through some free videos, Jason found a whole free playlist about a technique provided by the Federation he was already familiar with. Azure Feisty Ape. Looking at the first sequence, Jason found out that he had remembered everything correctly, but there was a small problem. Jason couldn't clearly see the mana flow through the holographic screen. It felt somewhat blurred, and focusing his eyes on the mana flow, his eyes began to hurt slightly. There wasn't anything he could do about it, so he just binge-watched the videos one after another without focusing his gaze at the mana flow. Even then, Jason made huge progress by only seeing the instructions made by the middle-aged instructor in front of the camera. Seeing that is better than solely surveying the mana flow, Jason thought, and many hours passed unknown to him. He was still lying on his bed re-watching the instructions about the Azure Feisty Ape technique when he heard a cracking next to him. The mana stones that were previously thick dark blue color turned into brighter blue, and looking at the amount of mana stored inside them, Jason was astonished. More than half of the stored mana was used up, and the egg began to shake violently, while small cracks started to appear on the shell. Jason's mood heightened immediately, as the atmosphere turned delightful when the cracks deepened. The shell burst open, only to reveal a small puffed-up owl chick with small tipsy eyes, looking at Jason with its black button-like eyes. After shacking of the remaining eggshells, it looked at the mana stones before it toddled towards Jason as fast as it could, throwing itself into his embrace. Jason felt the owl chick's happiness inside himself as they shared each other's emotions, turning himself even more happy as he already was. Holding the fist-sized chick, Jason remembered that he had to give it a name. Is it a boy or a girl? Jason wasn't sure which gender the owl cub belonged to, as a thought was transmitted into his mind, telling him that the owl chick was a female. Thinking about a few female names, he told the little owl chick some of them, but Jason felt that she would reject each of them. If he had to be honest, his naming sense was horrible, probably even worse than the worst name generator humanity had. After a long time, Jason's head began to hurt slightly, and he subconsciously entered the soul world inside his mind. He saw a small feeble string struggling to stay strong between the snowflake owl's soul print as Jason saw an illusionary forest, moon, and a cloaked archer hunting something. Connecting all together, a single word appeared in his mind: Artemis. Without knowing what's going on in his small soul world or how he could think of such a name, the small owl chick chirped delighted, and Jason felt that she liked this name. So, it's Artemis, Jason thought, smiling lovingly at his soul bond. The color she radiated was not as feeble as before and much stronger, which made Jason even happier, but he was still unable to decipher the color somehow. It felt as if each color was inside it, but also somehow not. Luckily, Jason found out about the mana deficit, and Professor Gray's theory was also valid, so Jason had no reason to be sad. It was only afternoon, but Jason felt extremely exhausted while his whole body ached when he fell asleep while holding Artemis in his hand.